Salute and welcome to the season 2 premiere episode of The Entity. And for this episode, I wanted to do more of a character analysis, but also a personal reflection as well. So it's a mix of both. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about the character from the Power Universe, Tommy Egan. So if you see some of my stories on social media, you'll probably know who I'm talking about. Now, if you ever watched Power, you know Tommy is intense, loyal to a fault, explosive, emotional, sometimes reckless, sometimes brilliant, and definitely dangerous. But the reason I wanted to talk about him today isn't because I think I'm like him in the obvious ways. It's actually the opposite. I started realizing that when you strip away the violence, the chaos, and the crime story around him, Tommy represents something deeper. He represents what happens when loyalty, pain, identity, and survival instincts collide without any real emotional guidance. And they got me thinking about something interesting. What happens when two people share similar emotional cores but take completely different paths in how they deal with them? Because sometimes the most interesting character analysis is when the character forces you to analyze yourself as well. So first, we have to understand who Tommy actually is. Tommy Egan is one of the central characters in the Power universe. He's the best friend and business partner of James St. Patrick, also known as Ghost. From the outside, Tommy looks like the classic hot-headed enforcer. He's aggressive, he's impulsive, he acts emotionally, but the deeper you look at his character, the more complicated he becomes. Tommy isn't just violent for the sake of being violent. His entire identity resolves three things: loyalty, survival, and belonging. Because you see, Tommy grew up in chaos. His family life was unstable. He didn't grow up with the kind of emotional structure that teaches you how to process feelings in a healthy way. So, instead of learning communication, he learned reaction. Instead of learning reflection, he learned survival. And the thing about survival mode is that it rewires how you interpret the world. Everything becomes about trust, everything becomes about betrayal, everything becomes about loyalty. For Tommy, loyalty isn't just important, loyalty is his moral compass. If you're loyal to him, he'll defend you to the end of the earth. But if you betray him, that betrayal becomes unforgivable. And that mindset shapes almost every decision he makes throughout the series. Series of shows, because he appeared in 3 shows in the whole universe. The first thing I noticed about Tommy that I recognize in myself is loyalty. Not the violent version of it, of course, but the emotional foundation of it. Tommy is extremely loyal to the people he considers his own. When someone entered his circle, he would text them fiercely. Loyalty as a value is something that resonates with me. If someone is important to me, I care deeply about showing up for that relationship and turning in that person as well. Whether it's friends or people I consider friends, I should say. Whether it's people I have feelings for, like crushes. Whether it's people who supported me through the hard moments. I value consistency. I value showing up. And if you listen to the show long enough, you probably know that relationships, whether it's people I'm close with, crushes, or just people who impacted my life, matter a lot to me. But here's the key difference between Tommy's loyalty and my version of it. Tommy's loyalty is instinctive and reactive. Mine is intentional and reflective. Tommy acts first, I usually think first, and that difference changes everything. Another interesting similarity between me and Tommy is something deeper: identity shaped by pressure. Trying to figure out who you are while navigating expectations, faith, mental health, relationships, and purpose, that creates internal pressure. You start asking questions like, who am I supposed to become? Who do people expect me to be? And who am I when nobody's watching. Tommy's identity crisis plays out through crime and loyalty conflicts. My identity struggles play out through introspection, storytelling, and reflection. But the underlying question is actually the same. How do you define yourself when the world is constantly pushing your expectations onto you? Now, that's something I think a lot of people, especially college students and me, can relate to. One thing people misunderstands about Tommy is that they think he's just an angry character. But anger is usually a surface emotion. Underneath anger is usually something else: pain, grief, abandonment, confusion. Tommy, experience, Tommy experiences all of those things throughout the story. His story, rather. But because he was never taught how to process emotions in a healthy way, everything comes out as just rage. Now, when I look at my own life, the difference is that I learned to process emotions differently. Not perfectly by any means, but differently for sure. Instead of reacting immediately, I tend to sit with things. I reflect, I think, I talk about them on the show. And honestly, sometimes that internal processing can be exhausting too. Because I would say I've had many years of acting and just being on campus of, and I have mixed experience of doing those two things of, which has just helped me have this persona of just wearing a mask and just pretending everything's okay when it's clearly not. But people wouldn't know that because I'm so good at hiding it. I should say. So to that end, Tommy is what happens when emotional intensity has no outlet. My life has been about finding outlets for that intensity, as of late out, as of late I would say. Through writing, through storytelling, through conversations about mental health, through faith, through reflection. One of the biggest contrasts about me and Tommy is control. Tommy is impulsive. If he feels something strongly, he reacts immediately. There's no pause, there's no moment of reflection. Emotion becomes action. When I feel something deeply, I pause. I analyze, sometimes, or rather, most of the times, I overanalyze. And sometimes I think about something so much that I end up doing nothing at all, which can be frustrating sometimes in its own way. But the difference between impulse and reflection is important because impulse often leads to destruction. Reflection often leads to understanding, sometimes growth. Another big difference between me and Tommy, I'm sorry, I, another big difference between how me and Tommy shows up is in relationships. Tommy loves fiercely, but his love often turns into possession. His relationships are intense but unstable because they're driven by emotion without boundaries. Now, when I think about my own experiences, especially when it comes to people I've had feelings for, I notice something very different. I tend to approach relationships, or rather, potential ones, carefully, respectfully. I think about timing. I think about boundaries. I think about whether that person is comfortable. Again, sometimes maybe too much, but I would say that careful approach reflects emotional awareness. As Tommy's love is passionate, but it's destructive at the same time. My approach is much slower and more thoughtful, but and sometimes awkward, but hopefully healthier. At the end of the day, the biggest difference between me and Tommy comes down to one question: what do you do with your pain? Tommy turns pain into destruction. He channels his emotions outward through violence and control. But my life has been about trying to channel pain into understanding. Because I would say for me, I've gone through and still experience a lot of pain to this day, with it be physical, emotional, mental. I deal with it, a lot of it, every day. So I always just tend to think and try to live out the whole I'm just doing my best mantra. So I try to channel channel it constructively through conversations with people I'm close to or fond of, into creativity and into storytelling. And if I'm being honest, that's part of the reason why this show even exists. Because talking about these things helps people and me to an extent realize that they're not alone in feeling the way that they feel. So when I compare myself to Tommy Egan, the conclusion is actually kind of interesting. We share some emotional foundations, loyalty, intensity, and deep awareness of relationships and betrayal, but we take completely different paths in how we handle those things. Tommy's path is chaos, mine is more of reflection. Tommy reacts, I tend to more or less analyze. And honestly, that contrast is what makes this so interesting. Because sometimes the characters we relate to the most are the ones we show us, are the ones who show us, I should say, what we might have become under different circumstances. And sometimes they remind us why the choices we make about our emotions, our relationships, or the lack of, or the potential ones, and our identity actually matter. So maybe the lesson, so maybe the real lesson here isn't about Tommy. Maybe it's about the fact that we all carry emotional intensity in different ways. The real question is, what do we do with it? Do we let it destroy things? Or do we learn how to turn it into something meaningful? And, and if I'm being completely honest here, that's something I'm still figuring out till this day, every day. And you know, maybe you are too. And and that's okay, because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We don't and not really supposed to have everything figured out. So we all are learning, and we'll continue to learn as each day comes. So yeah, and also before I close out this episode, I forgot to mention that the character of Tommy Egan from the Power universe is portrayed by the great and charismatic and talented Joseph Sakura. So shout out to him for portraying this great character that I was able to do this episode based off of. And I know this is kind of a tangent, but still related to the character. Is that one thing I like about the character is his like his funny like little one liners, and how like so I would say most of the time he's kind of like hamming it up, like being extra, but I would say like it works in context. Like it brings, I feel like it definitely makes this character more entertaining. I should say, and so and like and sometimes the situation is, or like the context of where and how he's saying these one liners, his one liners. I found myself able to sort of relate to what he's saying and laugh at the same time, which is something I would say it's really rare to do, especially for me. And so, with that, that concludes this week's episode of The Inner D, which also happens to be the season 2 premiere. And so I will talk to you all on the next episode, where I will be going into another one of my stories. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And with that, I will see you on the next one.